Tidyman and the Lit Squad take on Tramswen Valley. One fine day, when the sky was blue, with just a few fluffy white clouds, the prince visited some of the Welsh valleys. He was really looking forward to this visit, but oh, what a disappointment. He found that there was rubbish and litter of all descriptions absolutely everywhere. The streets were so bad that the prince's chauffeur could hardly drive through them. There were boxes, cans, banana skins and all sorts. It was dreadful. Even the beautiful weather couldn't cheer up the prince. He went home saying that the valleys were the dirtiest, grimiest, filthiest valleys he had ever seen. When the prince returned to his palace, he immediately telephoned the mayor of the valleys and told him what he thought. The mayor was so upset, he just cried and cried and cried. Then he said to himself through his tears, "I must do something about my valleys. They really are dreadful." He asked Mrs. Mayor for her advice, and together they worked out a plan. They told all the valley people that they had to work very hard to clean up their valleys. He explained to them about how to put out their rubbish tidily, either in strong bins with tight-fitting lids or strong plastic bags tied tightly. If they had an awful lot of rubbish, they had to hire a skip. He also told them that they should never, ever, ever drop litter again. Well, over the next few weeks, everyone busied themselves with a big clean-up campaign, and they were all careful to put their rubbish and waste out properly. They certainly didn't drop any litter. Soon the valleys were beginning to look much nicer. The streets had no litter trapped in the gutters, and the mountains looked greener because no one was dumping their rubbish on the hillsides anymore. People were beginning to learn how to look after their hometowns. They were now so proud of their home that they began planting flowers in tubs along the roadsides, making the valleys an even pleasanter place to live. Unfortunately, one of the valleys, Tramswen Valley, just couldn't be bothered to try. The streets were still covered with rubbish. The drains were blocked with litter. The hillsides all looked like rubbish tips. No one cared at all about the way Tramswen looked, or about the dangers caused by all the rubbish. Take the abandoned car, for example. One day a child would be likely to hurt himself on that. There's all the broken glass, or the car could fall on him, or he could even get trapped in the boot. So dangerous, but no one cared. Mrs. Grime, who lives at number 7 Coaltip Street, put out all her rubbish in cardboard boxes, piled high with rubbish which blew all over the place. The boxes went all soggy and collapsed. She had a bin, but it didn't have a lid on it, and that isn't any good. "I'm not worried about the rubbish, Menbach. What's wrong with it?" she would say. She just couldn't see anything bad at all about it, and she wasn't the only one. W.J. Tippett and Sons ran a small factory, and all their waste was just dumped over the riverbank, spoiling the banking and polluting the river. Occasionally, they did bother to hire a skip, but they never got it emptied. They kept piling the rubbish in on top until it overflowed and still landed up on the riverbank. Disgusting. And then there was the local supermarket, Trash's. Mr. Trash put out all his rubbish at the curbside, piled up so high that it fell onto the road causing accidents, with the wind blowing it all down the streets. Mr. Trash said, "I don't care what happens to the rubbish as long as it's not inside my shop." But Mr. Trash's rubbish didn't just look awful, it was dangerous too. Flies were being attracted by the waste food that was in the rubbish, and rats had been seen running in and out of the boxes. We all know what happens when rats and flies become interested in rubbish. Germs. Nasty, horrible things. No one likes germs. They spread disease and make people ill. The children were just as bad. Take Timmy Rubble and his friend Clara Clutter. They never ever put their rubbish in a litter bin. All their sweet wrappers, crisp packets, apple cores and drink cans were just thrown to the ground. They just didn't think and they didn't care. On top of all this mess, something strange was beginning to happen. Everyone in Trams Wen were feeling rather ill. Everyone was complaining of tummy aches. They all felt sick and just wanted to lay down and do nothing. What could the matter be? Now Tidyman and the Lit Squad watched over all that was happening in the valleys. And in all the places where people were thinking tidy, they helped. Tidyman was dressed in his black clothes with his black cape thrown over his shoulders. The Lit Squad were little people who looked much like Tidyman, but they all carried big brushes and large bins on their backs. They were always ready to help those who wanted to keep their home areas tidy and tried hard to do this. At night, they prowled the streets looking for litter and rubbish that had been missed or was too difficult or dangerous to get at. But they didn't help Trams Wen people. Why should they, when they didn't care? If Tidyman and the Lit Squad had cleaned up the mess, in a few days it would be just as bad. Tidyman was far too busy to waste his time on people who didn't care. Well, 4 weeks later, the mayor received a letter from the palace. The prince was giving them another chance. This time, he could be proud of his valleys. The people decided that they would decorate their nice, tidy streets with flags and bunting and have parties in the streets for the children and dances in the evening. They were all looking forward to the prince coming and they knew he would be pleased with everything that they had done. But in Trams Wen Valley, the people carried on as usual, just making a mess everywhere. The big day came. All the people lined the streets to welcome him. They all waited to see the look on the prince's face when he noticed the change in their valleys. The prince looked around at the clean streets and green hills, and suddenly his face lit up with a big smile which stretched from ear to ear. All the people laughed with pure glee and pleasure. Everyone, the people and the prince, were overjoyed with the way the valleys now looked. The party started. Everyone laughed and sang and had a really good time. The valleys were a happy and clean place to be. But what about the people in Trams Wen Valley? They could hear the people in the other valley having a superb time, and they began to wonder why they were all so miserable and feeling so ill. They decided to ask the local doctor, Dr. Dregg's advice. Dr. Dreggs didn't have a clue what was the matter. He looked through his medical books, but he still couldn't find out what was wrong with the people of Trams Wen. The only thing he could think of doing was to visit the happy-sounding valley to see if he could pick up some clues. He came back and reported on what he had seen. He had seen the parties and dancing in the streets, but more than that, the streets and mountains somehow looked different. At first, he couldn't work out why, and then he realised what it was. The other valley was clean and tidy and a pleasant place, but Trams Wen Valley was absolutely awful. It was a dirty, grimy, filthy, horrible place to be. Then suddenly, he realised why everyone was ill. They all had untidyitis. He immediately rushed to find a special book on rare diseases that he had never used before. He read all about untidyitis and explained to the people about their illness. He went on to suggest that they call in the experts in this type of disease, Tidyman and the Lit Squad. Suddenly, Tidyman and the Lit Squad appeared on the hillside. They realised that Trams Wen people were so very worried and were prepared to help them find a cure for their illness. He gave everyone a black plastic bag and a sweeping brush and lent them skips so that they could clear up their valley. This was all part of the cure, but to really make it work, the valley had to stay clean and tidy, and everyone had to promise never to drop litter again. This is the end of the story. Well, almost. they never did drop litter again. They all became so tidy and clean that the prince presented them with a royal charter, changing the name of their valley around from Tramswen Valley to New Smart Valley. So there's a happy ending to this story. Very often, your area may look a bit like Tramswen, but if we all promise never to drop litter, then perhaps our story will have a happy ending too. So please, keep your area tidy.